I am so excited to be speaking today to someone who has become a bit of a dear friend over the last few months.
Oh.
As you know, I love essential oils and I love aromatherapy. And I find with a lot of people that work in aromatherapy, they either specialize in the physical or they kind of in the more metaphysical aspects and that. But Elizabeth Ashley, in her own bio, describes herself as having 1 foot in the scientific and 1 foot in the magical. She's been working with essential oils since 8 and is now an amazing aromatherapist. She's over in the UK. I'm so excited to talk to you today, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for your time.
How on earth do I follow that introduction? Thank you, Adam. It's so nice to be here. I'm really honoured.
Now, not only have you been working with essential oils since the age 8, I believe that you've come from a bit of a family background of being surrounded by essential oils as well.
I do. I have to say I come from a very privileged background as far as aromatherapy goes. My mum was one of the founder members of the International Federation of Aromatherapy. She was one of the first aromatherapists in the UK. She was trained by a tremendous aromatherapist called Patricia Davis. And yeah, as you say, I would have been about 8 when she started her training. And when I was about 14, she and my dad divorced, and she went on to marry another man who I consider to be one of the greatest aromatherapists of all time. His name was Michael Cook, and between them, they were extraordinary in both their teachings, but the way that they worked. And they taught me, I won't say everything that I know, the important stuff. They taught me the important stuff. And obviously I've continued to build on top of that over the last, nearly 30 years.
And one of the things why I was so excited to get to know you and talk to you more is that you really honor that dance between physical and the spiritual and all the different layers. And how did you kind of get into that aspect of it all, from going from, oh, well, this is good for, a bit of a cough or a cold or something, to that might work on a chakra or something like that?
Well, I think there's sort of several answers to that. The first being that Mum and Michael were like that. Michael was a chemistry teacher in secondary school, so he was very much based in the scientific, but both of them were pagans, Wiccan pagans, so they were very involved in psychic stuff. Mum was a professional clairvoyant and astrologer, and it was that work that led her to aromatherapy. She would see lots of different people to obviously do readings to, but she noticed that there was this sector of people who were in chronic pain and the doctors could do nothing for them. And that's why she went looking for something to be able to help those people. So right from the very word go, in the way that they taught aromatherapy was in your first aromatherapy workshop, you learned to discern the aura. Well, I've always been able to see auras. I was born being able to see auras. In fact, somebody, when I was about 9, said to me, why did you always draw rainbows around people when you draw them? I'm like, because well, why don't you? I thought it was really strange that nobody did. So it's not a conscious decision to do that. It's just who I am, really. But in terms of the science, I am fascinated by neuroscience. I am fascinated by this idea that an emotion could cause you to be physically ill. And when you've been working with the aura and the chakras from the word go, which I was, then all that does, that molecular science backs up what you knew about the aura and the chakras already. So my job initially was to be able to say, right, well, I'm going to give a scientific evidence for what that is. And then I got sucked into understanding it much, much more deeply. And I guess the thing is that you do what you naturally can do, can't you? And I naturally have just been able to do those.
So anyone who comes to you now and says, oh, I'm having problems with my digestion, or my, I'm getting headaches all the time, or that, for some people, as we start to venture down the kind of natural medicine, we look at that more holistic. But there's still plenty of people in the world that would just go. And do you think this is probably from the basis of, and I'm not here to bag pharmaceuticals, but if I've got a headache, give me a tablet and that'll sort it out. But they don't look at all the different layers?
Well, I think that the reason why I smiled was it was a memory there. When I was working with Mum and Michael, they used to sell pots of cream all around the country, and we'd go to these massive agricultural shows, and we'd have this beautiful stand with even more oils than this and lots of pots and cream. And people would come up and they'd say, I've got a migraine or I've got a headache. And I'd say, give them the headache preparation, lavender, basil, rosemary. Just rub that on your forehead. And they'd look at me as if to say, well, you rub it on your head. And I would have to say to them, well, how is that more strange than taking a tablet for your headache? And that was stopped them in the tracks, because they were so programmed into that's what I do. It was amazing just watching, the things fall from their eyes. But I think that people, I would say that's 25 years has passed. First of all, people understand what aromatherapy can do now. But also, I think people understand the bits and pieces, like you get off caffeine, you deal with your stress. They understand that when you've got a headache, there's tension in the back of your neck, Yeah. So it's not as a complicated an argument as it used to be. But I do think that also, as a therapist, I am less likely to see somebody who only believes in the doctor, because by default, why would they pay the money to come and see me?
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that the mind, body, spirit is really important, but by the time somebody decides to come and pay me money, they kind of already got that already.
Got you. And I guess this is one thing that, and I'm slightly biased because I am so passionate about essential oils, but what I love about essential oils is that we can, and there is a lot of scientific research that shows that different oils help with inflammation or gut aches or balancing hormones and that kind of thing. But there's also, the oils not only do that, but at the same kind of one-stop shop, we can also look at emotional stuff with the oils and the spiritual stuff with the oils. Whereas often you might go see one person who will help you spiritually and another who will work you physically. So oils kind of are a one-stop shop, aren't they?
They are. I think we have to be really careful that we don't jump the gun, because you're quite right that there is a lot of medicine, no, what's the word I'm looking for, evidence into what the oils can do. However, the smallest percentage of that is done on a human in a clinical setting. Yeah. We will learn about inflammation and potentially it's on a rat or it's in a petri dish, but the reason why they're testing those oils in the first place is because people have been using those plants to do those things for a long, long time. The scientist doesn't want to understand that it does it because he already knows it does. It's got thousands of years of history behind it. What he wants to understand is why. And that's what's fascinating to me, because then you can see, right, for example, it works on the CB2 receptor. So copaiba, for example, or beta-caryophyllene is in copaiba, but it's in things like black pepper and things like that. So the CB2 receptor deals with chronic inflammation, immunity and pain. So immediately, then you understand three things about black pepper. Because it works on that level, it's inflammation, immunity, pain. But also then we start to understand, for example, oxytocin. Oxytocin is a bonding molecule, sorry. So if we hold hands, if we cuddle, actually it's what causes the contractions in labor. It helps the milk to come in. We know that being touched brings oxytocin. We also know that inhaling essential oils, lots of essential oils, improves oxytocin. So then we learn lots of things, but then nothing, if you know what I mean, that we understand that the body has this rise in oxytocin, so then it can help us with sexual problems, with relationship problems, with emotional problems. Can we say that that one particular oil specifically is for emotional problems? That's more difficult. But we definitely know that we have this mental and emotional bridge, because that's what the neurotransmitters do.
Yeah. No, totally. Get what you mean. Now, I want to throw an idea at you, and in our previous and past conversations, we've kind of just gone around in circles. And if we go around in circles now, that's quite fine. But I know you've written over 20 works, and you get into, understanding how the oils work and research and those type of things. But you've also gone all the way back through history, through how certain plants are being used. And I often feel that, in our modern age, we have so many different distractions and, the bright lights and loud radios and all that type of thing that, in the past, they used to believe a lot more in unicorns and dragons and fairies, but maybe those things are still around, but we just have too many lights on and too many loud things on. So when it comes to plant wisdom, that which is, comes from thousands of years ago, those people were able probably to connect a lot more with plants than I'll say, politely, the average person these days as well. So do you think there's real credit in looking at what's survived the ages and been passed on through?
There's so many aspects to that question. The first thing to say is that Mum, her name's Jill Bruce, she wrote a book called The Garden of Eden, which is the study of 100 different essential oils, the emotional, the mental and the spiritual. And then she looked at medical astrology, tree of life, all different things like that. That work was given to her by a nature spirit. So it's very difficult for me to say no nature spirits, because I was brought up with a book. That's what I learned it from, a book from a nature spirit. In terms of going right back to the earliest mentions of a plant, which is what I do in my books, the reason that I do that is because I feel like before we had this split between the mental and the physical bodies around about the mid 18th century, when Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And he decided the emotional body was completely separate from the physical body. So anything before that time we assume, that they see them the same, that the emotional body and the physical body are connected. The really early spiritual religious stuff, because if we're going back to biblical times, religious stuff was medicine. That was the medicine. So that's where the wisdom is, that the religious stuff isn't just about religion. They understand it as their medicine too. So if we can look at that and be able to understand where their medicine comes from, that helps us to understand many more aspects of the oil than we see when we look in a textbook and we say respiratory or antifungal. When we look at it from a religious symbol point of view, and we understand the god or the goddess that they were speaking to, and what that god or goddess reflects in terms of a much bigger archetype, then we learn lots more about the different layers of the oil and how it can be used. Because you and I have talked about this before, how there's so many more aspects to a cough than just a cough.
Yes, definitely.
Why I cough is different to why you cough. It might be a bacterial infection, it might be an emotional thing, but you're more likely to be able to see that connection looking back at the original religious symbol that way.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I'm going to take you from, talking about the past, and I'm going to drag you into the future. Obviously, you look trepidatious about that. Obviously, 2020 has been a very different year to what maybe we all expected. We've had different challenges and that kind of thing. And I want to start diving into some specific oils, because I know people love to hear about what oils, someone who loves oils would recommend and that kind of thing. So everyone's had a different experience in 2020. Some people have thought it's been a great growth period. Some people have found it very traumatic. Some people are still carrying that trauma just picked up from 2020, or trauma from the past has come up. What oils would you recommend people maybe are reaching for at the moment, or have you found have kind of, you know, I know with crystals and oils for me at different times, one will keep showing up and putting its hand up, and you'll keep on, like you seem to be talking about it all the time. What kind of oils have been coming up for you through 2020?
Yeah, so again, you've asked a double-layered question. So I'll talk about the one that put its hand up the most. And it's not even an oil that even though I've got hundreds of oils behind me, there's probably 20 in my healing clique that I always go to, you know. They're my best friends. I've got, you know, a friend that I go out for walks with, a friend that I go and tell my secrets to, another one that I go and laugh with. It's the same with essential oils. So this oil's not even in my healing clique, and yet it's been profoundly useful in during COVID, and that's been cypress. So I've recorded a meditation actually. So if you wanted to link to that
we will do,
gives people a much deeper understanding why the reasons are. But I think that if you look at the really ancient medicine around Cyprus, it's connected to Asclepius, the Greek god of healing, and he healed lots of different ways. He was a man, and then he was revered as a god. You know, he was so good at his job. He was taught by Chiron, who'd been taught by Athena, but he became better than Chiron. You know, this is off the chart healing, and this is his plant. And he was well known for his sleep clinics. They would do sleep incubations. And so particularly if you found that you have dreamt strange dreams, or the anxiety has been coming through your dreams, or not being able to sleep, most people that I've suggested to use this meditation and this cypress oil have said it's extraordinary how much better I feel for it. It's also got a lightness to it. So when we're stuck at home, and I didn't mind it the first time, but I'll be quite negative about this time. I'm very bored.
Being in the UK, yes, you would be in another lockdown.
Locked down again. Thanks, Boris. Your energy gets heavy, doesn't it? I can't be bothered. Yesterday, I even went. I felt peculiar at the end of the day. I got stomachache, and my husband said to me, "Have you had a drink all day?" And I went, "I haven't been bothered." He said, "Honestly, you know, I am that idle with it." So we don't want bass notes, because bass notes will take us down further. So that beautiful lightness, and it is like walking through the forest. You know, it opens the lungs up, and as you and I have been talking about, this respiratory connection of opening the lungs up is really, really important right now. I think that tea tree, boring as it is, has been a godsend to me. That right at the beginning, I was very, very paranoid about the pandemic, not because I worried that it was going to get me. I'm very lucky to live out in the countryside, but my daughter's a paramedic in the inner city, in the worst places that it is. So it felt close to me, even though it wasn't. So very early on, I started sniffing and breathing the tea tree oil to cleanse my respiratory system, but also check I could smell it and taste it. And that became a really good ritual of just making sure, like, well, you know, you're all right today, you'll be right tomorrow, you know, let's just do a bit of insurance for tomorrow. So tea tree was really helpful. And another oil that, again, not really one in my healing clique, is neroli. I think as you get older, you grow into neroli. I was never that bothered by it when I was younger. I was always a rose girl. But just one drop of neroli in a aroma pendant is really good for anxiety and just making you feel calmer and more positive and watching your thoughts. We've got some cards called the Tongue of the Trees cards. I don't know if you can see it. And these are used to bypass the conscious mind and speak to the unconscious mind. And I kept pulling neroli out. Whatever question I asked, neroli came out. In fact, I had a very spooky experience with some bees, and I was like, did I really do that? Pulled it out, neroli. And the key word for neroli is observation. Watch what you manifest. Watch your thoughts. Watch, but also notice what's going on around you. And I found that that's been very, very soothing, just making me feel like I've got a protective layer around me, you know, that things are not seen, but are there, you know. And it's just, I found neroli really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So those 3 oils, how would you suggest, the best way to use them, or just as long as you're getting them around in your energy or on your body kind of thing, obviously they're using them safely, they'll dance with your magic and that'll do, that'll help.
It sounds really strange to say. It's a real paradox, I know, that I use very few oils topically these days. I don't find the need to do it. So if I'm particularly stressed, if I've got, pains in my back from writing because I'm hunched up for hours on end, then we'll have a massage, we'll have a bath. But I don't tend to use oils very much topically. I'm much more interested with that in how it affects my emotions. So most of the time, I'll just put 1 drop in an aroma pendant around my neck, or even, and this is one of my oils tops. I don't mind putting oil on this one. 1 drop on there, and I'm just inhaling it through the day. That's it. Just letting it talk to my brain, talking to the limbic system, calming the amygdala, calming the HPA axis, just breathing it. Cypress, I don't even put it on me. I just have the bottle in my hand when I listen to the meditation. Yeah. And tea tree, let's use a bottle. This is not tea tree, this is lavender, but it's too far away over there. I simply go, so I get the oils down, and I can taste that. I can taste that, and that, that's going back to your old medicine. The indigenous medicine was all inhalation.
Yes.
So we don't need to have it on topically all the time. And particularly with oils like frankincense. I'm a big advocate of spikenard for fear, but it's a protected oil. So we don't want to be putting loads and loads on. Why are we putting it here, hoping that it'll get to our brain, when we can get it to our brain much quicker by simply doing that? That's a really fast route to the brain, and it goes straight to the part of the limbic system that affects our mind, that then sends messages to our body. So,
and that's the thing. Yeah, I think that's the thing that people often think, oh, it's just sniffing an oil. What's that doing? But you've just illustrated exactly that it goes straight to, that's the quickest way to the brain, and the brain's that control center, so it's going to impact everywhere.
Sure. So a really important thing then is to understand the stress response, because I think of everything 2020's brought us, it's been stress. So if I always talk about the tiger. So imagine I'd gone to the zoo and walking around the zoo. So my husband, the strong silent one I call him, he's like a rock, nothing moves him, but I am an anxiety ridden creature. So I'll be walking around and I'll go, those tigers are lovely, but once they get out, and Darryl would go, well, there's a lock on the door, isn't there? They're not going to get out, are they, Liz? And this is actual things that happens in our life. He spends his whole life calming me down. And I'll say, but what if they're hungry, though? What if they're hungry? And he'll go, yeah, but you saw the wagon feeding them. You said it looked like our wagon, actually. You saw them, so they're not hungry, are they? And I go, yeah, but I don't think I saw him eat. He still looks like he's trying to get out to me, right? So imagine that, right? So then we superimpose this idea and we say the amygdala, which is the part that we perceive as fear, is me. So then you recognize that the amygdala is going, but what if, scared. Then Darryl is what's called the VMPFC, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. So the job of the VMPFC or Daryl is to switch off the amygdala. That's all its job is to do. But like Daryl, after a while he goes, oh my God, I'll just forget it. I'm going to go and read the paper. I'm leaving you to it. And that is exactly what happens with the VMPFC. After a while it goes, I'm going to read the paper. I'm leaving you to it. So this amygdala sends messages to the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, which sends messages to the pituitary, that sends messages to the adrenals. And the adrenals secrete the hormones that we have through fear. So imagine that the tiger did come, and the cortisol is extremely helpful because it takes away all of the stuff, like, for example, we don't need the stuff that looks after our skin to get away from a tiger, so it draws it away. We don't need our digestive system, so it draws it away. It gives all of the energy to the muscles to turn into glycogen so that we can jump. So that's very helpful. That's anti-inflammatory. All the inflammation switches off so we can get away from the tiger. But the problem is, you see, Daryl's really fed up with me now, so he's not going to come and get me down from the tree. He's not going to say you've imagined that tiger. He's just going to leave me there and carry on. He'll start watching more sport, because that's what happens. So I stay up there, and the cortisol keeps going and keeps on going and keeps on going. It turns on its axis, becomes inflammatory. So then we start getting things like arthritis, period pains, particularly sexual dysfunction, because remember, the amygdala spoke to the hypothalamus, then spoke to the pituitary. The pituitary is in charge of sex, basically. So we can't, we have period problems, we have impotence. All of that happens because we're not switching off the stress. And the essential oil, in particular, lavender, because that's the one I've got in my hand, but it's relevant because it's right, switches it off. It switches that fear response off straight away.
And I love that story. Not only is it an analogy in itself, but I think 2020 has been such an unpredictable year, and none of us have experienced anything like this. And we've been sitting there the whole, I can, as you're talking about that, I was thinking about conversations that I'd had with my partners throughout this year of what if we can't get food at the supermarket anymore? What if, what if? So we've all been hiding from the tiger up a tree for a whole year, kind of thing. Yeah.
So we are. So if people, well, also, the other thing is we're all getting fat. And that's an interesting thing, because we are sitting around and we're doing nothing. And every time I go in the kitchen, I go, what's in the fridge? But if you're secreting lots of cortisol, the adipose fat in your stomach multiplies 4 times as much as it would if you didn't have cortisol being secreted. So this has got as much to do with being stressed as it is to do with being greedy.
Yeah, and I believe it's because the body is basically preparing itself that we're stressed, we don't know when we'll get fed next. Let's hold on to that fat just in case. Kind of thing.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Well, yeah, because it'll be a long time till I eat up the tree, won't it? That's exactly right. Yeah.
So you spoke about cypress, you spoke about tea tree, you spoke about neroli. Are there any others dealing with the stress that you'd say, if you're still worried about the tiger and in that what if game, any other oils that you'd throw into the mix?
I think every person is going to have a different oil.
Yeah.
And in that kind of nature, one of the things, when there was, I went to talk at the Drops conference in Budapest last year, and Rhiannon Lewis was there. And I was quite intimidated by meeting her, because if you think I'm good at science, she really is. She's very, very clinical. And I was thinking, I'm really not going to understand a word she says in her talk. But in actual fact, her talk was so simple, and it was completely profound, and it made me understand aromatherapy in a whole different light. And what she said was, you take the oil and you go, how does that make me feel? And it's as simple as that. I'd always said, actually, what do you think of that? But that's the wrong part of the brain. We want to do, how does it make you feel?
So the difference being think, not think, but feel.
Right. immediately, when you ask somebody how does it make you feel, they tap into a different part of their body, don't they? A different processing system. And if we want to influence the feelings, what I would suggest is you take every oil you've got, lie it down in front of you, and just say, what do I feel when I get that one? What do I feel when I get that one? And if you think, well, that's a nice feeling, you don't even have to be able to say that feeling is happy or that feeling is relaxed. That's a nice feeling. Right, I'm going to stay with this oil. And again, a paradox. I have all of these oils, but when I'm writing a book, I only work with that one oil, and that oil goes everywhere with me. And so I've been writing the book about Melissa now for 18 months. The things that Melissa taught me yesterday are different to what it will teach me tomorrow. I still don't feel ready to let go of what I'm learning. So there's a great quote from the philosopher Heraclitus that goes round and round my head a lot at the moment. And he said, you can never step into the same river twice.
I love it.
The water is always changing. And I do think that's the same when you smell an oil, because the way you felt yesterday, well, it feels different to the way that you feel tomorrow. So it will teach you different things. So just sitting with that oil, is that the one I feel like I need today? Of course, there's trends, you know, you go, like I said, I am staying well away from bass notes at the moment because I'm already slovenly enough, you know? So that's an immediate thing. But also in your book, if I remember rightly, you've separated things into flowers, into seeds, into leaves.
Yes.
This idea of using a leaf for the new growth, surging forwards, that's helpful, rather than seeds at the moment. We're not in a place where we can germinate anything. Well, we're not in the UK anyway. We can't start a new business. We can't start a new project more than we could maybe in Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde. Couldn't do anything then. We've come out a bit more towards seeds, but at the moment, leaf oils probably are the most helpful. But that's just an indicator to go, those are the ones to get off the shelves. You can only have that intimate discussion with yourself of what's going on, because I always talk about the dark side of the moon. There's part of the moon that you can't never see. Same in a person, isn't there? I could talk all day and you still wouldn't see the whole of me that I wanted to portray. But with an essential oil, you kind of tap that part of the brain that is quiet, and perhaps he's quiet because doesn't really know what to say. And you have a wordless conversation, which is more potent, really, I think. Yeah.
And there's two things I love what you said then. First of all, the idea of, someone just, there's books and there's advice and there's YouTube videos and there's all these different people telling you what oil is best for this, this and this. But we are all different. And that simple thing of how do I feel, you and I might tell everyone, oh, you all need lavender, but someone might smell lavender and that doesn't resonate with them. So I think that we've got to trust that as well. And I also I have a term, and I'm guilty of this because I'm a Gemini, is what happens is, those of you that are watching the YouTube video can see that Elizabeth has a collection of hundreds of oils behind her, and I have, a similar one with oils and crystals. But there's always a risk of becoming an essential oil slut. Where you go from that one to 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 that one. I can't remember its name or what it does and that kind of thing. And I love that you do a bit of essential oil monogamy, where you're let's really get to know
I have to. I have to. And that is, I'm not saying other people have to. I have to because I am such a flippity gibbet. But also because I don't know how to explain this without it sounding pretentious, but I do tend to absorb the energy of the oil. So, and then kind of become the plant, which I know sounds really strange, but probably the best example of that was when I was writing the basil book. I can see from your room, you're a nice, tidy person that has everything in its place. I am not that person. But when I was using basil has a a triple goddess, a triple voodoo goddess. And one of the goddesses was very much that everything had to be in its place. I've never cleaned the house so much in all my life. And I didn't know. And so if I'm not careful, I kind of become schizophrenic is a really poor word to use, but it gives the imagery of that I'm over here, I'm over here, I'm over here. So I have to be quiet. And so although I write blends for people, I very rarely use a blend myself. I'm better just with one single note.
No, I know exactly what you mean as well. So I wanted to take you now. We're going to kind of go on a journey. So this is the what ifs and the chaos of 2020. 2021 is just around the corner, where I think we're all getting excited. Like, okay, I've been calling 2020 our cocoon year. So we've all been in the cocoon, and now it's time to, we've faced our darkness. A lot of issues have come up about, not being able to do certain things, what's important to us, all that type of thing. What oils would you recommend for people to start breaking out of that cocoon and go, okay, it's time for a transformation? How do I break free?
Well, I guess with your analogy of the transformation coming out of the cocoon, that's going to be flower oils, isn't it? How they burst out from the bud. Personally, I'm more going to be using the citruses, and particularly the orange family of citruses. So right from the twigs of the petitgram, the neroli on the flowers, and the orange fruits, because it's like kind of going on a diet, isn't it? You have that fresh experience of all the salads and stuff, which is just beautiful to begin with, but then you get a bit sick of it. But they're so optimistic, aren't they? We've got to be careful we don't take this negativity past into Christmas, because otherwise we're not going to get going quick enough. We need to hit the ground running. Hopefully we have a vaccine and suddenly we can go out there working. Hopefully most people have been at home enjoying the fact that they've been able to put work in at home and in their projects and stuff like that, and be able to bring it out. And then kind of going back to what I said before about the things that hold the wood energy, but the unfurling of the spring leaves, that beautiful etheric energy of growing forward is in all of those things that are extracted from leaves, but particularly like the Lamiaceae family that have got like the lavender, basil, hyssop, there where the whole of the plant is aromatic. Just absorbing and assimilating all of the stuff we've learnt this year and being able to go forward. And really, basil is always my go-to for get out of your head and do something. So the citruses would be beautiful, the leaves would be beautiful. Basil for me is a sergeant major who kicks my ass.
I love it. Yes, I can relate to exactly what you're saying with basil there. And then I guess, one thing that people love to do for a new year is there's always what are going to be the things to watch in 2021. Now, I know we're doing a bit of forecasting, and who knows, we all thought 2020 was going to be a year of rainbows and lollipops, and we're all going to skip down to our greatest life ever kind of thing and live our best lives. That hasn't been the case. But what do you see? What do you intuitively feel, or what just resonates with you that might be some oils that would be good in 2021 for society for humanity as a whole? And I know that's a big claim, and we're stabbing in the dark because who knows what's around the corner. But we're just
this is completely intuitive, not thought out at all in any way, shape, or form. But I do feel that we're going to, as we move into Aquarius, we're coming out of the boneyard, as Adam Sumner calls it, of all the planets in Capricorn, and we're going into a much more innovative and equal sign of Aquarius. And in the Melissa book, I keep seeing these themes that are reminding me androgynous, and equality. So potentially, I would say the oils that have that nature will be useful. So we just talked about basil. Basil is definitely a female archetype, but she's kind of butch. She's like, I would say she's like a soldier in Afghanistan, she's absolutely sturdy. So you've got that male female balance. And jasmine that is definitely the queen of the night, but somehow masculine, you know? Yes. Not like rose is very feminine. There's definitely a masculine component to jasmine. So thinking about those kinds of balances might be helpful as we're going to go into a whole different energy, aren't we? And we're going to be looking at, well, 2020 has definitely asked us to look at different regimes of who is equal and who is not, especially in the UK. We've definitely seen people who've got nice detached houses and big gardens have had a nicer experience than those in high-rise flats, for example, you know, trying to equal things out. So where there's an equal balance between energies might be interesting oils, I would have thought.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to jasmine. I know Vanessa and I, in our book, we like to personify the oils and give them a gender as well. And it was a long debate over jasmine, because jasmine is sometimes referred to as the king of the flowers, but we're like, it has this feminine energy. And what we found is that, you know, it is about that merging of the masculine and feminine together, like the full moon energy, because the moon shines because of that masculine and the sun shining on it. But that's where creation comes and new beginnings and that type of thing. So all of us, regardless of what gender we identify as, we have a masculine and a feminine side. That masculine drives us forward, but the feminine colours it in and makes it interesting. So jasmine's a really amazing one.
And that's, I mean, if you think about it, we've really been forced to face that this year. You know, we've been locked away, and if you didn't get creative, you got very bored, didn't you? So people have been doing things that they haven't been able to do for a long time because they've been in that masculine archetype of achieve, but then we've gone into a female standpoint, very yin, very passive, very submissive. So I think as we start to come back, we'll see more of a balanced, hopefully, energy. And so balanced oils will be helpful, I think.
Definitely. Now, I wanted to hit you up with a few different oils that I've got your Oracle deck. I love it, the Tongue of the Trees that you co-created. And there's a few oils that I'm aware of, but I haven't had too much personal experience with. And I wanted to kind of throw a few at you and get a bit of guidance on them. The first one was Galbanum.
Ooh. So, so Galbanum is more myrrh than myrrh. Imagine myrrh, but deeper. So it's the personification of Osiris, so the god of the dead. And it's very much related to let's think how to say that. It's soul energy rather than spirit energy. So to clarify what I mean by that, imagine that the soul has many incarnations, and each incarnation is the spirit. The spirit is quintessentially you, but it only has one incarnation. When it comes back again, it's a new spirit, but the soul pathway has been the same. The Galbanum is soul pathway medicine. And it's to do with the I am. That pathway, that's that part of you that has been the same every time it's gone through. So when I'm talking about the soul, I like to use the shamanic idea of the carpenter. The carpenter is this tremendously gifted joiner, and he can do all of these amazing things, and he makes this stunning chair, and it's carved and it's intricate and it's beautiful. But at the end of the incarnation, the carpenter's more than happy to smash it to pieces. He has no worry about the work that he's put into it, because he knows that he can do it again. So Galbanum's like the carpenter energy, that it's part of you. It's an important part of you, but it's also separate in that it can observe dispassionately. You know, it watches the patterns play out. So when we think about it in terms of Osiris, we think about the Book of the Dead and the prayers to Osiris and the magical prayers to guarantee the journey into the afterlife. And he will eventually, one's soul will eventually reach a point where it's balanced against the weight of a feather. And so the Galbanum is about being able to tap into those parts of you that you don't talk to anybody else about. It's very Scorpio, you know, emotions that are too deep for tears, very, very hidden, very deep, dark. But when I say dark, people think I mean satanic. I don't mean that. It's very holy energy. It's very lovely energy, but it's very hidden and arcane. So spiritually, we talk about that journey, but physically we could say sexual problems, things to do with Pluto, but also tremendous for things like abscesses or wounds that just have festered and they're pussy, you know, and they're infected. Then if we translate that back into the spiritual realm, we can imagine what those secrets would be. Those ones you don't want to talk to anybody about, but actually they're thoroughly on display for everybody else to see, probably except for you, because they dictate every action that you do. You know, they reflect you, like you were saying about reflecting the sun. They reflect from you all of the time. So things like child abuse, stuff like that, dark trauma, that would be Galbanum. I don't know if
love that. And of course, because Galbanum's a resinous, comes from a resin, but whereas we normally think of resins being big trees like the frankincense or myrrh or copaiba, you know, this is just more of, you know, a small plant that you kind of can snap open the twigs kind of thing, can't you?
And that's an astute observation, but there are some plants that are a bit like that. And if you think that it comes from the Umbelliferae family that Angelica comes from, no, that's Angelica, Archangelica. That's the stuff of the angels. Same as fennel is very. The stalk of fennel was Dionysius's Cain. It was Cain. You know, these are very. That's a very arcane family. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to throw a couple of others at you that I'm gagging to know a little bit more about from your perspective. Myrtle, good old, like just a common myrtle.
I love myrtle. Myrtle's like a little songbird. So imagine that. I use it for coughs, but it's very antitussive, so it stops the dry, irritated coughs, you know. But it's very much for upset children. And it's transformative energy. And I do plan to research myrtle much more in depth, because I've noticed in Greek mythology, myrtle comes up in pretty much every single story. So that's never like for no reason.
Yeah.
Be interested to see why that is. But it always seems to be when it's worn, it seems to mark a point of transformation in the story. And I do think that that's the case with children. And I always think it kind of, when I was doing the cards, I could hear them singing. And she didn't have her own song. She stole a song, you know, Hush Little Baby, Don't Say a Word, Daddy's going to buy you a mockingbird. She completely stole it. And I was just like rocking like this. And it was the energy of, and if that's not going to work, I'm going to try something else. And if that's not going to work, I'm going to try something else. And it was the resiliency of it, you know, that almost like, I guess, Jason and the Argonauts going to the Golden Fleece, all those trials, and they overcame all of them. Myrtle's like that. It's like you fell down, get up again. Get up again. Come on, dust yourself off, have a smile, off you go. And you know, that kind of in Ayurvedic medicine, so in traditional Chinese medicine, they would call it earth medicine, that nurturing, that ability to be resilient, not the, oh, darling, everything's really, you know, overcompensating, over cosseting next to not even looking up from your mobile phone, that balance in the middle of that beautiful earth energy. That's very much Myrtle, of just being, do it again, don't worry about them, do it again. It's lovely.
Yeah. And that could be a nice one for 2021 as well, couldn't it? With, you know, just up we go and keep that upbeat positivity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, next one, I'm going to quiz you on 2 more, if I may. The next one I wanted to kind of get your insights in was cystis.
Cystis is an interesting one that I don't know in depth, if I'm honest. I know it from 2 points of view, and that's it. So it's a specific for trauma. And if you think about batch flower remedies, and you think about, there's like a rescue remedy. You must have them over there, don't you?
Yes,
you have the Australian Barralet. Right, okay. So the specific for nightmares is rock rose, which is cystis.
Yeah.
And then you have labdanum, which is the absolute of it. But cystis is a lovely, clear, upbeat oil. And it has this ability to go, I know, that was awful, but look in front, this is here, this is now. So it was really clever for flashbacks, PTSD flashbacks. And in particular, if you blend it with CBD oil, it's amazing stuff. But also very good for the skin. So for wrinkles, for older, more mature skins, or smokers' skins. But in terms of being able to map out the bigger archetype, I couldn't on that one. Sorry, not yet.
That's what in your stages of monogamy, it's when you haven't dated too much.
I haven't, and actually I probably won't, because I do like it, but she and I aren't that good friends. You know, the ones that I want to are the ones that I have a really close relationship with. And unless something came up with Melissa, what came up is seeing so many clever things in the science, and I don't really see that in cystis, to be honest. I think it's more of a spiritual oil than a physical oil.
Got you. Well, the final oil I do want to ask you about, which I know you have a very close relationship with, and I think you've been dating this one for a while. I had not heard of it until I became familiar with you and your work. It's Monarda.
Yes, I knew you were going to ask that.
Yeah.
I've done another video especially to show you all the aspects. I could talk for weeks about Monarda, so I better be concise. So how it came about was when I was pregnant with my youngest child. I'm an old mother, and I became very ill. I got a blood clot in my lungs and very compromised. I was very poorly with it. And then we moved here to Ludlow, which is very much on hills. And so being able to walk to Dexter to school was a very basic thing, but fraught with difficulties because I couldn't breathe. So I decided what I've got to do is write a book about how I'm going to get better, because that was the only way I was going to focus on it. So I was writing a book about bronchitis and about respiratory diseases, and I came across this random little clinical trial that said you could heal scarring within the respiratory tissues with 2 chemical constituents. One was thymol, one was geraniol, or thymol, I guess. So immediately I grabbed Tisserand and I was like, I got my Kindle out, search function, to try and find what oil was highest in those, because like you, I'm like, well, if there's an oil, I have to have it. And it came up with Monarda, and I was like, never heard of it. But when I looked at it, I thought, well, I'm going to get it. It took ages to source it. And I was thinking, because it was for respiratory, it would be not very nice smelling. I don't really like clinical smells like eucalyptuses and stuff like that. So I wasn't really that excited. I took the top off, and it's like a small piece of heaven. It's like a cross between, it's like a bergamot. It's called bee bergamot, the flower. So it smells a bit like bergamot, but crossed with apples. It's so beautiful. And it's so light and airy. So you will have grasped that it's tremendous for respiratory problems. And within a week, incidentally, of using it topically, I could breathe well enough to climb a very tall hill here. So that medicine was really fast. So it's a Native American plant. It grows like a weed in America, in North America. And the indigenous people use it for many different things. So the Lakota people use the leaves and the flowers in the bath water of newborn babies to be able to strengthen them and to build their system up to make them stronger. But also it's used in two of their most important ceremonies. The first is the sun dance. The second is in their sweat lodges. So it has a totem animal, which is the elk. So elks are really fascinating creatures in that they really love their own sex. And I don't mean that they are homosexual. I mean that I always talk about the quilting circle. All the girl elks are together, and I can imagine them doing their quilting and gossiping. That's what they're like. They always like to be, the men are together, the women are together, and they stay in those groups. And they're very, very social within that group. But they're very, very quiet creatures. So when they're stitching their quilts, they don't talk very much. But part of the totem elk energy is the ability to go off on one's own and think things through. And that's what the elks do. One may just decide to leave the pack. I don't think the word's pack, herd probably, and just go off on its own, and the others don't follow. And it can be gone for ages and ages and ages, but when they come back in again, they just kind of go, oh, here's your needle, have your quilting back, and they just get on again. So this is really sacred sort of knowledge to the Lakota people in particular, because that's kind of the idea of the sweat lodge, that one goes off, sits, processes one's thoughts. Now, bear in mind that in the sweat lodge, they wouldn't have a bottle of an essential oil. What they have is stones, hot stones. So what they do is they throw the monarda leaves onto the hot stones, which release all of those vapors, and they breathe that. So if you read any herbal medicine, there's a tremendous lady called Kiva Rose who writes a beautiful, beautiful thing about monarda, and she talks about how its energy is so light you drift away on butterfly wings, and it is so much like that. It's like becoming a fairy. Your energy just becomes so much more light. It's impossible to be angry at anybody around monarda, because it is like fairy dust, and you just can breathe so much easier. And because the energy is so yin, very female, very passive, very submissive, one doesn't really process the emotions on a conscious level. They just dissipate and go. So when the elk goes back to the thing, you haven't got any arguments to have with another elk. They're just gone. It's just the loveliest oil. Wow. And of course, with long COVID, tremendous, because it will repair the lungs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's one that's a bit hard to source at the moment, isn't it? But maybe there is. I know in your mum's book she thought that hyssop was not relevant until this century, and it might come. Maybe monarda is another one that will make an emergence in later to help us through the next stage of our evolution.
Yeah, I think it depends what country you're in as well. I know that in Hungary they use it ever such a lot.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Interesting. Now, the one final thing, I could talk to you for hours, but we probably should get on with our lives at some point. But one thing I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on is there seems to be this, in inverted commas, this perceived war, because there's obviously been a growth in the popularity of essential oils around the world in the last decade or so and that type of thing. And part of that has been, the rise of large network marketing or direct marketing companies such as doTERRA and Young Living, of which doTERRA, is a brand that I'm a big fan of. And then there's the traditional aromatherapists, and sometimes it's aromatherapists don't like the network marketing aspect of it, and vice versa, and that type of thing. What do you see as that relationship and the future of essential oils as it does rise in popularity? Are there any concerns and anything that you're excited about?
One of the things I made decision about when I first started writing the books was that I would not get in the middle of that war.
Yeah.
And so I will be careful how I answer this, because I do think that there's a lot more to do with egos than anything else involved in it. But I see that I think the problem is that we've talked about it really at length, that an essential oil recipe can't actually make somebody that much better. And so therefore just buying lots and lots of oils without some kind of understanding of the process behind them doesn't help you very much. There's a safety concerns over ingesting essential oils, because some can't be metabolized very easily through the liver, and obviously essential oils don't get absorbed into water, they float on the top. So that gets people get very upset about that, and likewise using them neat, people get upset about that. I think that actually the problem doesn't actually come from a war between the aromatherapists and the multi-level marketers per se. It's the fact that people are trying to learn well, perhaps they don't understand that aromatherapy and essential oils are slightly different for a start off, because aromatherapy is a holistic modality. It's not just putting on an essential oil. But trying to learn things through Facebook posts and snippets of information is impossible, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I think I heard you say in a previous interview that you get worried because you can jump on Pinterest and there's 100 different blends for headaches. And that's kind of taking back to what we were talking about at the start, that that's not looking holistically either. Yeah.
No, and in some ways, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because Gagley and I have built a whole recipe hub of database of recipes. There's about 400 in there now, based on those cards. But they're going deeper into, in the same way as we've talked about oils, looking at the whole part of the oil as much as we can in connection with the complaint. But I think when somebody has done an aromatherapy diploma, and I'm saying somebody, I mean kind of my diploma, because I haven't done it, everybody else's is different. There's an awful lot of knowledge that you cannot put on a Pinterest post.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's that. But I just think, and I also get very worried about, and I will openly say this rather than getting into the argument, when there's a company as big as doTERRA and Young Living, and they have a customer base as big as they do, to be able to have the availability of the oils that they need to be able to do that, then they buy up vast amounts of oil. And there's a lot of oils that kind of now are plants. For example, if we continue to harvest oil from frankincense at the rate that we are, there will be no more resin left in the trees by 2050.
Got you.
So personally, I like to buy oils from artisan distillers that do small amounts. That's my personal preference. I don't wave the flag of saying that aromatherapists are better than, you know, essential oils people. And likewise, I do think that there's lots of aromatherapists that I know that don't have a healing bone in their body. So, you know, the things that I see them say to people sometimes, the arguments that they get into, I think, well, I wouldn't want your hands on me.
Yeah, no, totally understand. Now, as with most of our conversations, we always answer a couple of questions and leave a whole lot more. I'm sure there's some people that are either watching this video or listening to the podcast and they want to find out more about you. Where do they find you apart from knocking on your front door? Where can they find out more about your work?
So my website is www.thesecrethealer.co.uk. But the best place to find me is usually on Facebook, and my Facebook page is The Secret Healer Writes. And you can find me on Amazon and all of those places too. We do have two different YouTube channels. Me talking like this is list of essential oils and their uses. And then we also have ones that are deeply into going into the whole of information about a certain oil, and that's called the Tongue of the Trees after the cards. And both those are in YouTube.
As always, Elizabeth, it's been an absolute pleasure to throw ideas backwards and forth and to hear your perspective on some different things that I think are relevant for, you know, a lot of us in this change into the new year, as well as, some oils that are a little less known but really exciting. And I think probably shares in Monada, if anyone has shares in Monada, it's going to go up now as well. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much for having me on, but also for just taxing my brain and asking such interesting and thoughtful questions. I've really enjoyed it, Adam. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure.